The auction block was a place where broken things were sold, and Sarah had learned long ago that this was where she belonged. At 19, her reputation preceded her like a dark shadow. Wild, untamable, dangerous. She'd been passed from one ranch to another, each owner more frustrated than the last. Nobody could control her. Nobody wanted to try anymore. As she stood in the blazing sun, her dark hair whipping around her face, her eyes blazing with defiant fire, Sarah wondered if this would be the time nobody bid at all. Then she saw him. A man in his early 50s, weathered and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his black hair. He was Apache, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her breath catch. He wasn't looking at a wild girl to be broken. He was looking at something else entirely. And then, to everyone's shock, he started bidding, higher and higher, past what anyone thought she was worth. When the gavel came down, Sarah's entire world shifted. What she didn't know in that moment was that this stranger had been searching for someone exactly like her, someone who understood what it meant to fight back, to refuse to be broken. This wasn't a sale. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. His name was James Tallbird, though everyone called him Jim. He owned a sprawling ranch at the edge of the mountains, a place where wild horses roamed and the wind sang songs that seemed to belong to another time. He didn't speak much during the drive, and Sarah sat rigid in the passenger seat, every muscle tense, ready to run at the first opportunity. She'd heard stories about men like him, charming at first, brutal when you defied them. But Jim never tried to charm her. He simply drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression calm and accepting. "You're going to try to escape," he said finally, his voice deep and measured. "I want you to know that I know this. I'm not going to stop you if you decide to run, but I'm going to ask you to stay long enough to understand what I'm offering." "And what's that?" Sarah asked, her voice rough with suspicion. "Freedom? I've heard that before." "No," Jim said. "Not freedom. Choice. There's a difference. Freedom is an illusion that most people never achieve. But choice is real. I'm offering you the chance to choose every single day whether you want to stay or go. Not because I'm trying to be noble, but because I learned a long time ago that you can't tame something wild by force. You can only destroy it, and some things are too beautiful to destroy." Sarah didn't know what to say. When they arrived at the ranch, Jim showed her to a small cabin, left her supplies, and a horse she could use to leave if she wanted, and simply walked away. No locks, no guards, no conditions. She stayed that first night because she was exhausted. The second night because she was curious. By the third night, she'd ventured to the stables and met Storm, a black stallion with a reputation as fierce as her own. Every ranch hand warned her away. He'd bucked off every rider, thrown a man 20 feet in the air. He was dangerous, they said, uncontrollable. Sarah understood him immediately. She didn't try to ride him or tame him. She simply sat with him, hour after hour, letting him know that she wasn't like the others. She wasn't there to dominate him. She was there because they were the same, both wild, both wounded, both refusing to accept the world's definition of what they should be. Jim watched from a distance, never interfering. He simply observed as something extraordinary unfolded. One morning, to the shock of every ranch hand, Sarah rode Storm, not as a conquest, but as a partnership. They moved together like they'd been created for this moment, horse and girl, wild things who understood each other's language. It was the most beautiful thing anyone at the ranch had ever seen. And Jim, watching from the fence line, felt something inside him crack open. That night, Jim told Sarah his story. He told her about losing his wife to illness, about the grief that had nearly destroyed him. He told her about his daughter, who had run away at 17 because he'd been too harsh, too demanding. He'd spent 10 years searching for her, only to discover she'd built a beautiful life he would never be part of. And he told her that when he saw Sarah on that auction block, he saw his daughter's defiance in her eyes, her refusal to be diminished, and he knew he had to try again. Not to control her, but to witness her, to honor her. "I wasn't looking to save you," he said quietly. "I was looking to save myself, to prove that love without conditions is actually possible." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Jim said, "you decide. You can stay or leave. You can build a life with me or build one somewhere else. But whatever you choose, it will be your choice, and it will be enough." Sarah stayed. Not out of obligation or fear, but because for the first time in her life, someone had given her the rarest gift, the freedom to choose her own destiny. She became Jim's partner in rebuilding the ranch. Together, they created a sanctuary for wild horses, animals broken by abuse and neglect, and Sarah discovered a gift for reaching them that nobody else possessed. She could feel their pain because it echoed her own. She could communicate with them in the language of survival and defiance and gradual trust. Years passed. Sarah became known across several states as a miracle worker, a woman who could reach horses nobody else could touch. She developed a training program that became famous, not for breaking horses but for honoring them, for teaching people that the most powerful beings are those we work with rather than against. Jim aged gracefully, watching his creation blossom into something beautiful and wild and absolutely untamed. When Jim passed away peacefully in his sleep at 87, surrounded by the horses he'd saved and the woman he'd believed in, Sarah found his will. Everything was hers. The ranch, the sanctuary, the legacy of a man who understood that some things are too magnificent to tame, and that the greatest love is sometimes the love that says, "I see your wildness, and I choose to celebrate it rather than destroy it." Sarah stood in the pasture where Jim used to watch the horses run free. Storm, now old but still powerful, stood beside her with his head held high. She thought about the auction block where Jim had found her, broken and believing she was worthless. She thought about his faith in her, his refusal to accept the world's judgment. If you've ever felt like the world was trying to tame you, trying to sand down your edges and make you acceptable, I want you to know what Jim knew. Your wildness isn't your weakness. Your defiance isn't your failure. Somewhere, there might be someone waiting to appreciate exactly who you are, not despite your nature, but because of it. If this story stirred something in your heart, please share this. Share it with someone who's been told they're too much, too wild, too difficult to love. Share it with someone who needs to hear that the right person won't try to tame them. They'll ride alongside them, straight into whatever beautiful, untamed future is waiting. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about being changed. They're about finally being seen.